In this video, we're going to be talking about the most disturbing law in Family Guy. And I want to start with something most people miss entirely. If you ask the average person what Family Guy is about, they'll say it's a dumb comedy. Peter Griffin falls down, a chicken fight breaks out, Stewie says something British, and there's a random cutaway about something that happened in 1987. Surface level? Sure, that tracks. But underneath 24 seasons of fart jokes and Conway Twitty bits, this show has quietly built one of the most psychologically disturbing fictional universes ever put on television. We're talking about a baby who has genuinely attempted to murder his own mother on a cruise ship with a machine gun, a talking dog who keeps a loaded firearm in a safety deposit box because he has considered ending his own life, a father who shook his infant son to death and it gets referenced as a throwaway punchline, and a teenage girl who the entire universe seems architecturally designed to break down over and over until she accepts that her purpose in life is to absorb the suffering of everyone around her. Most people laugh at Family Guy and move on. They watch a clip on YouTube, maybe catch a rerun at 2 in the morning, and they never think about it again. But if you actually sit with the lore, if you connect the episodes and the timelines and the character arcs that span more than 2 decades, you start to realize this show has been telling a much darker story than anyone gives it credit for. So let's figure out the truth. Let's start with the most dangerous person in Quahog. And no, it's not Peter. It's the 1-year-old baby sitting in a high chair, plotting to take over the world. Most people think of Stewie Griffin as a joke. He's the baby with the football-shaped head who talks like a British supervillain and builds ray guns in his bedroom. That's the version of Stewie that shows up in memes and clip compilations. But that version only scratches the surface of what Stewie actually is when you look at the full picture. From the very first episode, the show establishes something about Stewie that no other animated comedy has ever attempted. This isn't a baby who is funny, because babies are cute. This is a baby who is terrifying because he functions like an adult sociopath trapped in an infant's body. His very first scene in the pilot involves him plotting to kill Lois, not in a vague, wouldn't it be funny if kind of way. He builds weapons, he strategizes, he talks about matricide the way other characters talk about what's for dinner. And for a while, the show played that as a running gag. Every week, Stewie would try to kill Lois. Every week he'd fail. It became part of the wallpaper, something you expected but never really took seriously, until the show decided to actually follow through. In season 6, the show aired what might be the most ambitious 2 episodes in its entire run. Stewie kills Lois and Lois kills Stewie, and the names aren't metaphorical. Stewie actually does it. Here's what happens. The family goes on a cruise. Lois and Peter leave without taking Stewie along, which sends him over the edge. He boards a speedboat, tracks them to the middle of the ocean, corners Lois on the deck of the ship, pulls out a machine gun and opens fire. The bullets tear through her chest. She falls backward over the railing and plunges into the water. And Stewie goes home, sleeps soundly, and waits for the world to catch up. 6 days pass. Lois is considered missing. Then a year passes, an entire year where the family moves on. Peter starts dating. Chris believes Lois is at a health spa, and Meg, according to Stewie, actually starts to flourish after her mother's death. Think about that for a second. The show is telling you that the only time Meg has ever been happy is when her mother is gone. We'll come back to that later. Now, during this year, Stewie is living his best life. No one suspects him. He's gotten away with murder. And Brian, the family dog, who is also Stewie's closest friend, doesn't even realise what happened until Stewie casually admits it to him. Brian is horrified. He vows to bring Stewie to justice. But before he can, Peter gets arrested for the murder instead, because Stewie planted evidence so perfectly that even the legal system points to Peter as the killer. Here's where it gets really disturbing. Stewie didn't just kill Lois, he He created an airtight frame job against his own father. He kept drawings of Lois being murdered in various ways and a gun, then strategically disposed of them in the trash at exactly the right moment, so that Joe and the police would find them and connect them to Peter. The timing was so precise, it looked accidental. It wasn't. It was programming. This is a baby who understands forensic psychology better than most adults. Peter goes to trial. He's found guilty of first-degree murder. He's seconds away from being sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. And then through the courtroom doors walks Lois. She survived. She'd been shot, fell overboard, was rescued by a merman, developed amnesia, wandered the country for months, ended up working at a fat camp in North Carolina to stop the kids from eating each other, dated a man who turned out to be a white supremacist, got hit in the head with a bottle at a hate rally, and that impact restored her memory. She rushed back to Quahog just in time to reveal the truth. Stewie tried to kill her. Now a normal show would end there. The villain is exposed, justice is served, but Family Guy doesn't do normal. The moment Lois points the finger at Stewie, he vanishes. He goes home, grabs his weapons, ties up the entire Griffin family, and escapes to Washington, D.C. with Brian. And this is where it goes from dark to genuinely chilling. Stewie infiltrates the CIA headquarters. He hacks into their supercomputer. He takes control of the global power grid. Stan Smith and Avery Bullock from American Dad try to stop him and fail completely. And within hours, Stewie Griffin, a 1-year-old baby, becomes president of the world. Not a figurehead, not a puppet, full, unchecked, totalitarian control over the entire planet. He broadcasts from the White House. He makes laws. He bans direct-to-video Disney movies. He forces Hilary Swank to supply the world's milk. These are ridiculous, absurd demands, but the point is that he has the power to enforce them. And no one can stop him. Not the military, not the government, not the CIA. A baby in a diaper is running Earth. Lois eventually snaps. She arms herself from Stewie's own weapon stash, tells Peter dinner is in the oven, and storms the White House. What follows is one of the most violent fight sequences in animated television. Lois crashes through the Oval Office window, wearing combat gear. Mother and son go at it with guns, knives, explosives, and hand-to-hand combat. The battle is long and brutal. Lois gains the upper hand. She aims a shotgun at her infant son and is about to pull the trigger, but she can't do it. Maternal instinct kicks in. She hesitates, and Stewie uses that moment to turn the tables. He's about to kill her for good this time, when Peter walks in and shoots Stewie in the chest, then the head. Stewie dies. Peter and Lois stand over the tiny corpse of their son and hold each other in silence. No jokes, no cutaways, just two parents mourning the baby they had to kill. And then the screen reads, "Simulation over." The camera pulls back to reveal Stewie sitting in a chair, connected to some kind of device. Brian walks in with postcards from Peter and Lois on the cruise, which is apparently going well. Everything we just watched, both episodes, the murder, the trial, the world domination, the final battle, all of it was a computer simulation Stewie ran to see what would happen if he actually followed through on killing Lois. Now here's the thing that separates this from a cheap twist. Pay attention to Stewie's reaction. He doesn't say, "I realise killing my mother is wrong." He doesn't have a moral awakening. What he says is that things didn't work out well for him in the simulation, and that his plans for matricide and world domination will have to wait, not be abandoned. Wait. The lesson Stewie learned wasn't ethical, it was strategic. He didn't develop a conscience, he developed patience. And that distinction is what makes Stewie Griffin one of the most disturbing characters in television history, animated or otherwise. Seth MacFarlane himself has acknowledged that this two-part arc was the turning point for Stewie's character. After seeing how his plans would end, Stewie softened. The show began to play him less as a villain and more as an eccentric, flamboyant child with a complicated inner life. But the word softened is doing incredibly heavy lifting here, because the episodes that followed still contained some of the most unsettling character work in the show's history. Fast forward to season 16, episode 12. Send in Stewie, please. And this is the one that breaks everything open. There are no cutaways in this episode, no B-plot, no Peter falling downstairs or Quagmire making inappropriate comments. It's just Stewie sitting in a child psychologist's office for the entire runtime. 22 minutes, one room, two characters. And the conversation that unfolds is unlike anything the show has ever produced. The therapist, Dr. Cecil Pritchfield, is gentle, observant, and patient. He notices things about Stewie that no other character in the show has ever acknowledged. He sees that Stewie is lonely, and when he says it out loud, Stewie cries, not for a gag, not as set up for a punchline. He just breaks down because someone finally saw him. Over the course of the session, Stewie admits he pushed another student down the stairs. He admits he plucks his hair from anxiety. He discusses his fascination with musicals and his fling with world domination. He talks about his sexuality, claiming to be heterosexual, but the show frames it in a way that suggests otherwise. MacFarlane himself has said publicly that Stewie will ultimately be gay or, in his words, a very unhappy, repressed heterosexual. And MacFarlane connected that repression directly to Stewie's aggression, his desire to kill Lois, and his obsession with control. All of that rage, all of that violence comes from a baby who doesn't understand what he feels and has no one in his life who can help him figure it out. But the most devastating moment in the episode is what happens with the accent. Stewie drops it, just lets it go. And underneath is this quiet, normal, American-sounding kid who admits that the entire Stewie persona, the British villain, the evil genius, the megalomaniac, all of it is a mask, a coping mechanism he built to survive a world that doesn't understand him. He considers letting the mask go permanently, considers just being himself, and then he puts it back on because being himself means being ordinary, and being ordinary in the Griffin family means being invisible, like Meg. The episode ends with something genuinely chilling. The therapist, Dr. Pritchfield, starts having a heart attack near the end of their session, and Stewie watches it happen. He doesn't call for help. He doesn't panic. He just watches this man die because the doctor had seen through the facade. The doctor knew the real Stewie, and that made him dangerous. So Stewie let him go. That night, Stewie crawls into bed with Brian and says he's done something awful. He doesn't elaborate. The show never revisits it. The audience is left with the understanding that Stewie Griffin, this baby the world finds adorable and quotable, just let a man die because he got too close to the truth. And he told no one except his dog. Now, if all of this wasn't enough, the show has continued to push Stewie into increasingly disturbing territory over the years. In one episode, Stewie artificially impregnates himself with Brian's DNA in an attempt to bond with his best friend by becoming co-parents. The result is a litter of deformed human-dog hybrid puppies. The birth scene is graphic. The puppies are grotesque. The entire episode plays like a body horror film disguised as a sitcom. This is a real episode that aired on network television on a Sunday night. In another episode, Stewie tries to increase his own evil nature and accidentally creates a clone of himself. The clone is genuinely malevolent in ways even Stewie isn't. By the end of the episode, Brian is forced to kill one of them, but he can't tell them apart. The final shot is Stewie turning to the camera with glowing yellow eyes like Michael Jackson in Thriller. The implication is that Brian killed the original and the evil clone survived. The show never mentions this again. In season 23, Stewie accidentally vaporizes Meg with a ray gun, and instead of his usual indifference, he actually feels remorse. He begs for her return. On Christmas morning, Meg is found alive under the tree, hog-tied, with her legs reattached backwards. The show frames this as a happy ending. Stewie has committed murder, assault, carjacking, loan sharking, and forgery across the series. He's built fighter jets, mind control devices, time machines, teleportation systems, cloning pods, and multiverse transporters. He's created weather control machines and shrinking technology. He has an entire arsenal of weapons hidden in his bedroom that his parents have never discovered. And through all of it, the show maintains the fiction that no one in the Griffin family truly understands what Stewie is. That's the real horror of Stewie Griffin. It's not that he's evil, it's that he's brilliant, lonely, probably queer, deeply traumatized, and surrounded by people who either can't see him or choose not to. Every weapon he builds, every scheme he hatches, every violent outburst, it all comes from a kid who is screaming for someone to notice him. And the only one who ever does is a depressed, alcoholic, suicidal dog. Which brings us to Brian, because if Stewie is the most dangerous person in Quahog, Brian might be the saddest. And the show proved it in one episode that changed everything about what an animated comedy could do. Most people know Brian Griffin as the witty, martini-drinking family dog who reads Hemingway and dates women half his age. He's the voice of reason, the intellectual, the one character who seems self-aware enough to recognize how insane the Griffin household actually is. And for the first few seasons, that's exactly what he was. A grounding presence in a world of chaos. But if you watch the show long enough, you start to notice something about Brian that the early seasons hid pretty well. Brian isn't the voice of reason. He's the voice of someone who desperately wants to be the voice of reason, but keeps failing at it. He's a failed novelist, a failed screenwriter, a serial dater who can't maintain a relationship because he either gets bored, gets cheated on, or drives the other person away with his own insecurity. He drinks constantly, he smokes, he has no income, no career, and no plan. And the show, to its credit, has never let him off the hook for any of it. But there's one episode that took all of that subtext and ripped it wide open. And it's the episode that most Family Guy fans will tell you is either the best or the most uncomfortable 21 minutes in the show's history. Season 8, Episode 17. Brian and Stewie. Here's the setup. Brian and Stewie get locked inside a bank vault overnight. That's it. That's the entire episode. No cutaways, no B-plot, no music, no other characters. Just a dog and a baby trapped in a metal box for an entire episode. And what unfolds over those 21 minutes is something no one expected from this show. It starts with a problem. Stewie needs a diaper change. Brian is the only one there. So Brian, the intellectual, the sophisticated martini drinker, has to change a diaper. And then eat the contents. Yes. The show goes there. It's disgusting, and it's played for exactly the kind of shock value you'd expect from Family Guy. But it's also a setup, because once the gross-out humour is out of the way, the episode shifts into something completely different. The two of them start talking. Really talking. Not trading quips or setting up gags. Having a real conversation. And as the hours pass and the walls close in, the tone changes entirely. The comedy drains out of the room. The lighting feels different. The silences between lines of dialogue get longer. It stops feeling like an animated sitcom and starts feeling like a stage play about two people who have run out of places to hide from each other. And then Brian reveals his secret. He tells Stewie that the reason he comes to the bank isn't for his savings. It's for the safety deposit box. And inside that box is a gun. A loaded gun that Brian keeps there because he has thought about killing himself. Not as a joke, not as a hypothetical. He has genuinely considered ending his own life. He admits that he feels purposeless, that despite his intelligence and his sarcasm, and his ability to quote philosophers and critique bad writing, he sees no meaning in his existence. He calls himself a failed writer, a lonely soul, a burden to the people around him. He says the gun is there for the day he finally decides he's done pretending that any of it matters. Stewie, the baby who builds death rays and plots world domination, is completely speechless. For once, the character, who always has a comeback, who always has a scheme, who always has the upper hand, has nothing. He just sits there and listens to his best friend describe wanting to die. And then the episode does something that no Family Guy episode has ever done before or since. Stewie tells Brian he loves him. Not as a punchline, not as a setup for a joke about their weird relationship. He says it plainly, with no irony, no deflection, no callback. Just, I love you. And Brian quietly says it back. That moment, that simple exchange between a dog and a baby in an animated comedy about fart jokes and chicken fights, is one of the most emotionally honest scenes in television history. It recontextualizes everything about their relationship. Every adventure, every argument, every road trip episode, all of it was two broken souls keeping each other alive because they didn't have anyone else. The critics were split. Some called it brilliant, others called it pretentious. Fans were stunned, but what nobody could deny was that Family Guy had just proven it could do something nobody thought it was capable of. It could be brutally, uncomfortably, beautifully honest. But the show wasn't done with Brian, not by a long shot, because a few seasons later, it did something even more extreme. It killed him. Season 12, Episode 6. Life of Brian. And this wasn't a simulation. This wasn't a dream sequence. Brian Griffin gets hit by a car and dies. The episode plays it straight. There's no magical resurrection, no last-minute save. Brian is struck by a vehicle in front of the family, and they rush him to the vet. The vet tells them there's nothing they can do. And then, in one of the most genuinely devastating scenes the show has ever produced, the Griffin family gathers around Brian's table to say goodbye. Peter tells Brian he's his best friend. Stewie, who can barely get the words out, thanks Brian for everything. The kids are crying. Lois is holding it together for the family, and Brian, lying there broken, says his final words and closes his eyes. The heart monitor flatlines. Brian Griffin is dead. The family goes home. They grieve. And then, as if to prove that this wasn't a stunt, the show introduces a replacement dog. A street-smart Italian mutt named Vinny, who moves in with the Griffins and starts filling Brian's role. For 3 full episodes, Brian was gone. Not temporarily. Gone. The show committed to it. The audience reaction was volcanic. Petitions circulated demanding Brian's return. People sent death threats to the writers. Social media erupted. It became a genuine cultural moment. Not because a cartoon dog died, but because people realised they actually cared about this character in a way they hadn't anticipated. And then 3 episodes later, Stewie uses a time machine to go back and prevent the accident. Brian lives. The family never knows he was gone. And things go back to the way they were. Now on the surface, that's a feel-good resolution. The dog comes back. The family's whole again. But if you look at it from a darker angle, the show didn't bring Brian back because he mattered as a person. It brought him back because he mattered as a function. Without Brian, Stewie had no anchor. Without Brian, the show had no straight man. Without Brian, the emotional architecture of the series collapsed entirely. The show wasn't saying, Brian is important because he's loved. It was saying, Brian is important because he's useful. And there's a difference. One of them is love. The other is dependency. And the show has never really clarified which one it meant. But if Brian's death and resurrection showed us what he means to the family, his worst moments show us what he's actually like. And the list is not pretty. In Herpy the Love Saw, Brian convinces Stewie to become blood brothers. It's framed as a bonding moment. 2 friends cutting their palms and pressing them together in a ritual of loyalty. Except Brian has herpes. And he knows he has herpes. And he does the ritual anyway. Stewie contracts the virus, a baby, with graphic pus-leaking sores on his face. The visuals are genuinely revolting. And the worst part isn't the disease itself. It's the betrayal. Stewie trusted Brian more than anyone else in the world, and Brian knowingly infected him. Not out of malice, out of selfishness, out of a desperate need to feel close to someone, even if it came at their expense. Then there's the Ida situation. Quagmire's father, Dan, transitions and becomes a woman named Ida. Brian, not knowing who she is, meets Ida at a bar. They hit it off. They go back to her hotel. They sleep together. The next morning, Brian tells Peter and Lois about his new girlfriend with obvious pride. They burst out laughing. Brian doesn't understand why until Stewie explains that Ida is Quagmire's father. Brian's reaction is immediate and visceral. He vomits repeatedly, not from disgust at Ida specifically, but from the collision between his stated progressive values and his actual emotional response. Brian, the character who lectures everyone about tolerance and open-mindedness, can't handle it when the philosophy becomes personal. It's a brutal exposure of his hypocrisy, and then Quagmire finds out. He goes to the Griffin house and beats Brian within an inch of his life. Bloody, broken, barely conscious on the floor, Brian manages one final line. He tells Quagmire he slept with his dad and shuts the door. It's played as a dark punchline, but the subtext is devastating. Brian's only defense mechanism, even while being physically destroyed, is cruelty. This is the pattern the show has built around Brian over 20+ seasons. He's pretentious, but insecure. He lectures about morality, but fails every ethical test the show puts in front of him. He dates women he doesn't respect. He writes books no one reads. He drinks to numb feelings he refuses to examine. And the one genuine relationship he has with Stewie is built on a foundation of mutual damage. Brian Griffin isn't the voice of reason. He's the voice of someone who studied what reason sounds like and learned to perform it. And the show knows this. That's why it keeps punishing him. Not because the writers hate Brian, but because Brian represents something the show finds fascinating and horrifying in equal measure. The intellectual who uses intelligence as a shield against the emptiness underneath. He once moved to Los Angeles to pursue his screenwriting dreams and ended up directing pornography. He's tried to write the great American novel and produced unreadable garbage. He ran for office and lost. He dated an atheist who seemed perfect for him and lost her to Cleveland because he followed Stewie's advice to take things slow, and she assumed he wasn't interested. Brian's entire life is a series of almosts, almost successful, almost happy, almost good enough, but never quite there. And through all of it, the gun stays in the safety deposit box. The show has never told us Brian got rid of it, never showed him throwing it away or giving it up. For all we know, it's still there, waiting, just like Brian. That's the real tragedy of Brian Griffin. He's not a character who fails because the universe is cruel. He fails because he is fundamentally unable to close the gap between who he thinks he is and who he actually is. And the show, with surgical precision, never lets him forget it. Now, if Stewie is the most dangerous person in Quahog, and Brian is the saddest, there's still one character we need to talk about. One character whose treatment across this show goes beyond dark comedy and enters territory that is genuinely hard to watch. And the one time the show acknowledged what it was doing to this character, the conclusion it reached made everything worse. We need to talk about Meg. Because what this show does to Meg Griffin isn't just a running gag. It might be the most sustained act of cruelty in the history of American television. And the worst part is, the show knows exactly what it's doing. Let's start with the basics. Meg Griffin is the oldest child in the family. She's 17 for most of the series. She goes to school. She tries to date. She wants to be liked. She wants her parents to care about her. She wants her siblings to treat her like a human being. And in literally every single one of those areas, the show goes out of its way to make sure she fails. It starts small. In the early seasons, Meg is awkward but functional. She's a normal teenage girl with normal teenage problems. She gets embarrassed by her dad. She has crushes on boys. She argues with Chris. It's standard animated family sitcom material. But somewhere around season 3 or 4, the writers made a decision that would define the character for the next 2 decades. They decided Meg would become the family's punching bag, and not in a subtle way, in a systematic, escalating, genuinely merciless way. Peter hits her. Not accidentally, not as part of some slapstick sequence. In one episode, Peter is carrying a baseball bat and Meg startles him, so he hits her in the head. In another, he outright attacks her during a flashback. He's offered to sell her in exchange for a record. He's traded her for sex. He's told her to her face that he doesn't consider her part of the family. He once confessed, during what he thought were the last seconds of Earth's existence, that he secretly hates being around all of his children. When the apocalypse turned out to be an April Fool's prank and the kids heard everything, Peter didn't apologise. He bought them an Xbox to make it go away. But Peter's abuse isn't even the worst of it. The entire universe of Family Guy seems structurally designed to punish Meg for existing. Her own mother, Lois, regularly dismisses her. Chris insults her. Stewie is openly hostile. Brian barely acknowledges her presence. And the show's cutaway gags, the random jokes that pop up between scenes, routinely use Meg as the punchline for jokes about ugliness, loneliness, and worthlessness. In one cutaway, it's implied Meg doesn't have a shadow, as if the universe itself refuses to validate her existence. In one episode, the family's saying goodnight. Peter tucks in the kids. The camera pans to Meg's room. She has hanged herself, and the show doesn't address it, doesn't pause, doesn't acknowledge it as a dark moment. It's a background gag, a 1-second visual joke about a teenager's suicide, and the episode moves on as if nothing happened. In another episode, Meg is sent down through a vent during a home invasion. The robbers catch her and mistake her for a boy. When they realise she's a girl, Meg tells them she won't scream or struggle, hoping they'll assault her. They are horrified and refuse. Later, the robbers press sexual harassment charges against Meg. Joe tells the family she needs a lawyer, and the family ignores him completely. Peter thinks she's going to a dance. Lois tells her to have fun. Nobody helps her. That's not just a joke, that's a portrait of a family so fundamentally broken that they can't even recognise when their own daughter is in danger. And the show plays it as comedy, which is exactly what makes it disturbing. Because the audience laughs, and in laughing, they become complicit in the same indifference the Griffins demonstrate. Now there's one episode that took all of this subtext and brought it directly to the surface, and it's the one that divides the fan base more than almost any other. Season 10, Episode 2, Seahorse Seashell Party. Here's the setup. A hurricane hits Quahog. The family is trapped inside the house. The power goes out. There's nothing to do, and without the usual distractions, the Griffins start turning on each other. Specifically, they start turning on Meg. It starts the way it always does. Peter makes a snide comment. Lois piles on. Chris says something cruel, and Meg, for the first time in the series, fights back. She goes after all of them. She tells Lois that she is a terrible mother who failed her at every single turn. She tells Peter that his stupidity has ruined his children's lives. She tells Chris that he's a disaster. She doesn't hold back. She says the things the audience has wanted her to say for years, and the reaction in the Griffin household is immediate and catastrophic. The family falls apart. Peter runs away in tears. Lois chases after him, screaming. Chris storms off. Without Meg to absorb their dysfunction, the family has no outlet. They turn on each other, and everything collapses within minutes. And here's where the show does something that is either brilliant or deeply upsetting, depending on how you look at it. Meg watches the chaos unfold. She sees her family destroying itself, and she makes a choice. She decides that her purpose in the family is to be the lightning rod, to absorb the abuse, to take the hit so that everyone else can function. She apologizes. She takes the blame for everything. She walks back every true thing she said. And the family, immediately, goes back to normal. Happy. Functional. Bonded. The show didn't play this as a tragedy. It didn't frame Meg's decision as a sacrifice born of desperation. It framed it as growth, as maturity, as Meg finding her place in the family by accepting that her place is to suffer. This is one of the most disturbing narrative choices any animated show has ever made. The show took a character who had been systematically abused for a decade, gave her one moment of agency, one moment where she spoke truth to power, and then told her and the audience that the truth doesn't matter. What matters is stability, and stability requires a victim. Meg's purpose in the Griffin family isn't to be loved, it's to be consumed. She exists so the rest of them don't have to confront what they are. And the show stated this explicitly and never walked it back. But the cruelty doesn't stop there, because the show has also gone out of its way to punish Meg every time something good happens to her. In season 10, there's an episode called Lego My Mego. Meg is kidnapped, actually kidnapped by human traffickers. Brian and Stewie track her down across the country, fighting through henchmen, infiltrating a sex slave auction, and eventually finding her being sold to the highest bidder on a yacht. It's a dark, violent episode. Brian shoots people, Stewie fights with a silenced pistol. The show treats it like an action movie, but the premise is that a teenage girl has been captured and sold into sex trafficking. And when Brian and Stewie finally rescue Meg, something unexpected happens. A wealthy man's son sees Meg and is genuinely taken with her. He's handsome. He's kind. He makes a heartfelt proposal. He offers to send Meg home if she wants, but also offers her marriage, wealth, and a life far away from the family that has never valued her. And for the first time in the series, Meg has a way out. A real, genuine, romantic fairy tale escape from everything she's endured. She accepts. She starts to kiss him. And then Stewie, from a distance, shoots the man dead with a silenced pistol. He wipes Meg's memory of his involvement. She's left holding a dead man she'll never know could have saved her. And the show cuts back to the Griffin house as if nothing happened. Think about what the show just did. It gave Meg the one thing she's always wanted. Someone who saw her, valued her, and wanted to be with her. And then it killed that person, erased Meg's memory, and sent her back to the family that abuses her. The show literally had a character assassinate Meg's happiness and then made her forget it was possible. If you're keeping track, that's now a pattern. The show has established over and over that Meg Griffin is not allowed to escape. She's not allowed to fight back. She's not allowed to find love, success, or recognition. The universe of Family Guy is designed from the ground up to keep Meg exactly where she is, suffering, absorbing, invisible, and the show has gone even further in certain episodes. In one story, Meg is on a date with a man from the internet. They hit it off. They have things in common. It seems like it might actually work. Then she gets knocked out, wakes up in a motel room, and discovers he stole her kidney. Despite this, she holds him to a promise of a full day's date. He agrees. They spend the day together. At the end, he gives her kidney back, and they kiss. The show frames this as a positive outcome. Meg's best romantic experience in the series involves being drugged, having an organ stolen, and getting it returned as a romantic gesture, and she's grateful. In another episode, Meg gets a new look. She's confident. She's attracting attention. Things are going well, and then it's revealed that she looks good only by Washington, D.C. standards. The show can't even let her have a makeover without attaching an asterisk. There's a cruel irony in all of this. The show has acknowledged, through multiple characters and multiple episodes, that Meg's treatment is wrong. Brian has occasionally stood up for her. Quagmire once taught her self-defense. Even Peter, in rare moments of clarity, has expressed something resembling love for his daughter. But these moments never stick. They never lead to change. They exist only to give the audience a brief sense of hope before the show pulls the rug out again. Meg Griffin is not a character who fails because she's weak. She fails because the show won't let her succeed. She's trapped in a narrative machine that requires her pain in order to function. And the one time she tried to break free, the show told her that breaking free would destroy her family. That's not comedy. That's a philosophical statement about the role of suffering in dysfunctional systems. And the show made it casually, between hurricane jokes and a subplot about Brian tripping on psychedelic mushrooms. Now, if Meg is the family's designated victim, there's one more question we need to answer. Who built this family? Who created the conditions that made all of this possible? And the answer takes us to the man sitting on the couch in the living room, beer in hand, seemingly harmless, seemingly stupid, and far more dangerous than anyone gives him credit for. Peter Griffin isn't just an idiot, and the show has been telling us that for 24 seasons, hiding it in plain sight, behind chicken fights and random cutaways. But if you actually look at what Peter has done across this series, if you actually follow the thread, the picture that emerges is one of the most disturbing character profiles on television. And it all starts with a grave. In one of the most well-known cutaway gags in the entire series, Lois reminds Peter of what happened the last time he was left alone with the children. The show cuts to a small grave in the backyard. The headstone reads, Peter Griffin Jr. And Peter, without an ounce of remorse, explains that he thought shaking the baby would stop him from crying, then adds with perfect comedic timing that he was kind of right. That's it. That's the joke. Peter Griffin had a fourth child. He shook that child to death. And the show frames it as a one-liner. No follow-up, no consequences, no mention of it ever again. Just a headstone in the yard and a punchline about infanticide. Now, most people see that gag and file it away as another example of Family Guy going too far. But if you actually take it at face value, if you treat it as canon, then Peter Griffin didn't just accidentally kill a baby. He killed his own son through negligence so extreme it crossed the line into violence. And nobody in the show's universe seems to care. Not Lois, not the authorities, not the rest of the family. Peter Griffin got away with killing his infant child, and the only evidence is a tiny grave that apparently sits in the backyard of the house they all still live in. And here's the thing, that's not the only body Peter has buried. In Peter Normal Activity, Peter and the guys go to an abandoned asylum to brainstorm horror movie ideas. While exploring the basement, they hear a noise. They panic. They rush through a vent and stumble into a man with a hook. Peter, Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland gang up on the man and beat him to death. Only after he's dead do they discover he was an honoured military veteran who was trying to help them. They killed an innocent man, and their response is not to call the police, not to turn themselves in. Quagmire suggests doing the right thing, but Joe shuts it down immediately. Instead, they bury the body. When they spot his car, they dig a second hole and bury that too. They go home and pretend nothing happened. For the rest of the episode, Peter is haunted by guilt. Not real guilt, sitcom guilt, the kind where innocent phrases from Lois sound like accusations and every shadow feels like a cop. But the show resolves it in the most Family Guy way possible. They read a newspaper article revealing the man's military honours were fabricated. He was a fraud, and suddenly the guys feel fine about murdering him. The show gave Peter and his friends an out, a moral loophole that allowed them to dodge accountability for killing a human being. The man's fake military record doesn't make him any less dead, but the show treated it as though it does. And Peter went back to drinking at the Clam like nothing happened. This pattern repeats across the series. Peter's capacity for violence is staggering when you actually catalogue it. He's poured boiling water on Lois. He's used Joe, a paralysed man in a wheelchair, as a puppet by manipulating his limbs. He's accidentally killed bystanders, destroyed property on a massive scale, and caused more collateral damage than most cartoon villains. In one episode, Peter beats up a child named Kyle. Not an accident, not a misunderstanding. Kyle is a kid who bullies Chris, and when Peter goes to confront him, Kyle makes fun of Peter. So Peter, a grown man, beats a child bloody. The show frames it as Peter standing up for his son, but what it actually shows is a man with so little impulse control that he will physically assault a minor because that minor hurt his feelings. And if you think Peter's violence is limited to the present, wait until you hear about his family history. Because the show didn't just make Peter dangerous, it made his entire bloodline disturbing. In untitled Griffin family history, the family is trapped in a panic room during a home invasion. To pass the time, Peter tells stories about his ancestors, and every single one of them is horrifying. The Big Bang, according to Peter, was God lighting a fart with a lighter. That's the creation of the universe in Family Guy canon. Moses Griffin led the Israelites to freedom. The show establishes that the Griffin family has been part of major historical events for thousands of years. But not in a heroic way, in a catastrophic way. Nate Griffin was a slave in colonial America. He served the Pewterschmidt family, which is Lois's family. He eventually married one of Lois's ancestors. This means Peter and Lois are, through their family histories, connected by a lineage that includes slavery. The Pewterschmidts owned the Griffins, and now their descendants are married. The show also introduces Peter Hitler, Adolf Hitler's brother, a bumbling, annoying man who drove Adolf crazy with his antics. The show plays this for laughs. Peter's ancestor was the brother of one of history's greatest monsters, and the joke is that he was too dumb to notice or care. And speaking of the Holocaust, the show has a cutaway where Peter is hiding with the Anne Frank family. He's eating potato chips loudly. The noise attracts the Nazis, who discover the family's hiding spot. Peter's selfishness and stupidity directly led to the capture of Anne Frank. The show suggests Peter Griffin's ancestor was responsible for one of the most famous tragedies in modern history. And it's a 5-second gag. But Peter's personal history gets even more complicated when the show reveals that the man he called his father his entire life isn't actually his father. Francis Griffin, the strict Catholic who constantly berated Peter and told him he was worthless, wasn't his biological dad. In season 5, Peter discovers that his mother, Thelma, had an affair with an Irishman during a vacation. Peter was born not in America, but in Mexico. His mother went there to get an abortion, but Peter was born prematurely. She loved him immediately and took him home, but she never filed his citizenship papers. This means Peter Griffin, the man who once went on a crusade against illegal immigrants, is technically an undocumented immigrant himself. The irony is almost too perfect. Peter spent an entire episode kicking immigrants out of Quahog, getting his co-workers fired during an immigration inspection at the brewery, and patrolling the town borders, all while being exactly the thing he was fighting against. And when the truth came out, he wasn't just embarrassed. His marriage was potentially invalidated. His employment was illegal. His entire identity as an American was a fiction. He eventually failed the citizenship test. The show didn't give him a heartwarming path to resolution. It just let the absurdity sit there. Peter is an illegal immigrant who hates immigrants and whose father was an Irish drunk he's never met. That's his origin story. And then there's the Jewish revelation. In season 8, Lois goes to the doctor and learns that her mother, Barbara Pewterschmidt, was a Holocaust survivor. This makes Lois, and by extension the entire Griffin family, Jewish. Peter initially embraces the faith with his usual over-the-top enthusiasm. But when the ghost of Francis visits him and expresses disapproval, Peter's response is to grab a gun and shoot at Lois, his own wife. Because a ghost told him Jews were bad, Peter Griffin pointed a firearm at the mother of his children because he couldn't reconcile his dead fake father's bigotry with reality. And the episode resolves with Peter and Lois agreeing to just go back to the way things were, as if attempted murder is something you can smooth over with a conversation. Now let's zoom out for a second, because if you take all of these threads and weave them together, Peter Griffin's profile looks less like a lovable idiot and more like a genuinely dangerous person. He has killed a baby through shaking. He has killed an innocent man and buried the body. He has shot at his wife. He has beaten a child. He has destroyed entire neighbourhoods, committed arson, caused mass property damage, and been responsible for the death or injury of countless bystanders. His family history is connected to slavery, the Holocaust, and organised crime. He is an undocumented immigrant who persecuted other immigrants, and he is the patriarch of a family that systematically abuses its eldest daughter to maintain emotional equilibrium. Peter isn't just dumb, he's a case study in what happens when someone with zero self-awareness is given unlimited freedom in a world without real consequences. And the show knows this. That's why it keeps giving him power and then watching what happens. In one arc, Peter accidentally becomes the press secretary for Donald Trump after discovering he has a talent for delivering fake news. When Trump grabs Meg inappropriately, the family doesn't believe her. Not at first. It takes a second incident, one they actually witness before they take action. And even then, the resolution is Peter getting into a physical fight with the President of the United States that ends with both of them falling off the Washington Monument. In another arc, Peter discovers his house is a murder house and goes ghost hunting. When his hair turns white overnight from fear, he pivots into a career as a news anchor, where he blames all crime on immigrants and spreads outrageous conspiracy theories. He's so good at it that Trump calls to offer him a job. The show is telling you that Peter Griffin, the idiot, is perfectly suited for the machinery of misinformation because he doesn't know the difference between truth and entertainment. And neither does his audience. And then there's the multiverse, because Family Guy didn't just build a dark family, it built a dark universe. And when the show peeled back the layers and showed us what exists beyond Quahog, the implications were somehow even worse. In Road to the Multiverse, Stewie and Brian use a remote control to travel between alternate realities. They visit a universe where Christianity never existed, which means the Dark Ages never happened, which means human civilization is 1,000 years more scientifically advanced. It's a paradise. Clean, beautiful, advanced, and the show's implication is devastating. In the main Family Guy universe, the existence of organised religion set humanity back by a millennium. That's not a throwaway joke. That's a thesis statement about the nature of the show's world. They visit a universe where dogs are the dominant species and humans are pets. In that universe, Stewie is treated like an animal. He bites someone's hand and is immediately arrested, sent to the pound and scheduled for euthanasia. Brian has to break him out before he's put down. A baby sentenced to death for biting in a world where the power dynamics are simply reversed. They visit a Disney universe where everything is beautiful and animated in classic style. Meg is attractive. The family is happy. It's the polar opposite of everything the show normally is. And they leave almost immediately because the perfection is suffocating. The show can't even exist in a universe where things are good. And then at the end of the episode, a human version of Brian sees an opportunity. In the universe where dogs rule, humans are second-class citizens. This human, Brian, has no prospects, no future. So when the portal opens to send Stewie and Brian home, human Brian jumps through, hoping to be somebody in the regular universe. He says his goodbyes, he walks down the street, and he's immediately hit by a car and killed. The multiverse isn't an escape in Family Guy, it's just the same cruelty wearing different clothes. Every version of the Griffin family is broken. Every universe has its own form of suffering. And the version we follow, the one the show chose to focus on for 24 seasons, might be the worst one of all. Not because the characters are evil, but because they're just human enough to know better, and just selfish enough to not care. And if the multiverse makes it all feel meaningless, if infinite versions of Peter and Lois and Meg and Stewie are living and dying and suffering across infinite timelines, then nothing the show does should surprise you anymore. But it still does. Because some of these moments go beyond dark comedy. They go to places no animated show has any business going, and the show doesn't flinch. So let's talk about them. Every single one. But before we get to the bigger picture, there are characters and storylines in this show that most people gloss over entirely. Characters whose lore runs deep enough to fill their own episode, and in some cases already has. And one of them is the Grim Reaper himself. Because in Family Guy, death isn't just a concept. He's a guy, a regular, socially awkward, surprisingly relatable guy who shows up when people die and occasionally hangs out at the bar. Death first appears early in the series, when Peter has a near-death experience, and instead of being a terrifying, faceless entity, Death is played as a normal dude with a lousy social life. He's insecure, he's lonely, he can't get a date, he kills anyone he touches, which makes physical intimacy literally impossible. He shows up at the Griffin house in a robe, trips over furniture, and asks Peter for help, asking out a pet shop assistant named Amy. Peter agrees to help him in exchange for not dying. And Death, this cosmic force responsible for ending every human life, is so desperate for companionship that he agrees. They go on a double date. Death manages to connect with Amy. They have a decent time, and then at the end of the evening, Death accidentally touches Amy, and she dies instantly. He asks for the check and leaves. The show turned the literal personification of Death into a guy who just wants someone to eat dinner with, and then killed the only person who ever showed him affection. And it played it as a throwaway gag at the end of the episode. But Death keeps coming back throughout the series. He shows up when characters die. He has conversations with Peter. He has his own problems, his own complaints, his own sense of humour. And every time he appears, the show reinforces the same uncomfortable truth. In the Family Guy universe, death isn't scary, it's mundane. It's a transaction handled by a guy who'd rather be somewhere else, and that mundanity is what makes it disturbing. Because if dying is just an inconvenience handled by a bored civil servant, then life doesn't mean much either. And the show has explored this idea through one character who most viewers have completely forgotten. Bertram. Bertram is Stewie's half-brother. He exists because Peter donated sperm for cash, and that sperm was used to conceive a child. Bertram shares Stewie's intelligence, his ambition, and his capacity for violence. He's essentially what Stewie would be without Brian's influence. A genius without a tether. A child prodigy with no one to tell him no. In his first appearance, Bertram is still a sperm cell inside Peter's body. Stewie shrinks himself and enters Peter in a microscopic ship to destroy the sperm before it can be used. But inside, Stewie encounters Bertram, who is already self-aware, already talking, already scheming. They fight, they bond. They realise they have more in common than either expected, and they part ways, each aware that the other exists and neither entirely comfortable with that knowledge. Later in the series, Bertram returns. He's been born, he's grown, and he's dangerous. In one of the most ambitious Stewie episodes, Bertram travels back in time to kill Leonardo da Vinci in order to eliminate Stewie from existence, reasoning that Stewie's lineage traces back to da Vinci. The plan is genocidal in scope. Bertram isn't trying to kill one person. He's trying to erase an entire bloodline from history. Stewie follows him. They fight across Renaissance Italy, and Stewie is forced to kill Bertram to save himself, his family, and the timeline. A baby kills his own brother in 15th century Florence to prevent the unravelling of human history. And the show treats it as an adventure episode. A fun one, at that. But the Bertram arc raises questions the show never answers. If Peter's donated sperm created one Bertram, how many others are there? How many half-siblings does Stewie have scattered across the world, conceived from Peter's donations, raised by strangers, potentially carrying the same genius gene that makes Stewie and Bertram capable of time travel, dimensional manipulation, and murder. The show opened this door and never walked through it. Bertram is dead. But the implications of his existence suggest that the Griffin genetic legacy extends far beyond the family we know. And while we're talking about family legacies, let's go back to someone we haven't fully explored yet. Glenn Quagmire. Because beyond the catchphrases and the innuendo, Quagmire has one of the most complex and contradictory character arcs in the entire series. Quagmire is, by any objective measure, a monster. The show has established him as someone who has committed numerous sexual offences. He's a predator. He's manipulative. He's obsessive. His entire personality revolves around the pursuit of sex, and the show has repeatedly implied that many of his encounters are non-consensual. But the show has also given Quagmire genuine, emotional depth in ways that make him more disturbing, not less. Because a one-dimensional predator is easy to dismiss. A predator who also genuinely loves his sister, who cries at his father's hospital bedside, who has moments of real vulnerability, that's far harder to process. The Brenda arc is the most obvious example. Quagmire sees his sister being abused, and it breaks him. Not because he's a good person, but because Brenda is the one person in his life he actually loves unconditionally. His response to her suffering is not to call the authorities or seek help, it's to commit murder. He kills Jeff because in Quagmire's moral framework, violence is the only tool he trusts. He's never learned another way, and the show deepens this by giving Quagmire a backstory that explains, without excusing, who he is. His father Dan was a decorated military officer who, after years of internal struggle, transitioned and became a woman named Ida. Quagmire's response to his father's transition is confusion, anger, and ultimately rejection. He can't reconcile the father he admired with the woman his father became. And when Brian sleeps with Ida without knowing who she is, Quagmire's reaction is visceral and violent. He beats Brian nearly to death, not because Brian slept with a transgender woman, but because Brian slept with his father. That distinction matters. Quagmire's rage isn't rooted in bigotry. It's rooted in a sense of violation. Someone touched the one person Quagmire spent his entire life trying to understand, and did it casually, without knowing or caring who she was. The show eventually gives Quagmire and Ida a reconciliation of sorts. They talk. They acknowledge the complexity of their relationship. Ida apologizes for the shock. Quagmire doesn't fully accept the transition, but he stops actively rejecting it. It's messy, imperfect, and realistic in a way that Family Guy rarely attempts. But then the show undermines it, because Family Guy always undermines it. Later episodes turn Ida into a punchline again. Quagmire's discomfort becomes a recurring gag. The emotional growth the show spent an entire episode building gets chipped away by the same writers who created it. Because growth doesn't generate content in the Family Guy universe, dysfunction does. And Quagmire's own romantic life reflects this perfectly. In one episode, he meets a woman named Sonia who shares all of his kinks. She's aggressive, adventurous, and seemingly perfect for him. They date, they have sex. It's everything Quagmire has ever wanted. And then she drugs him, chains him to a bed, blackens his eyes, locks him in a storage container. She doesn't just dominate him, she abuses him. The same way Jeff abused Brenda, and the show draws this parallel deliberately. Quagmire, the man who has spent the entire series treating women as objects, finds himself on the other side of the equation. He's the victim now. And just like Brenda, he makes excuses. He says she's just satisfying his fantasies. He dismisses the bruises. He hides from his friends. Peter, Joe, and Ida eventually find him chained in a storage container and rescue him. Joe tackles Sonia. Quagmire is free. And in the aftermath, he admits he'll need to be the dominant one in future relationships, because being vulnerable nearly destroyed him. The show gave Quagmire a taste of what he's inflicted on others his entire life, and he learned nothing from it. He didn't become a better person. He became a more careful predator. That's the Quagmire cycle. The show gives him pain. The show gives him growth. And then the show takes the growth back because Quagmire, without his flaws, isn't a character the show knows how to write. And this brings us to something the show has acknowledged in its most self-aware moments, the fact that it knows exactly what it is and what it's doing. And while we've spent a lot of time talking about Peter, Stewie, Brian and Meg, there's one member of the Griffin household who has managed to fly under the radar for most of this conversation. And that's strange because when you actually look at her record, Lois Griffin might be the most morally complicated character in the entire show. On the surface, Lois is the patient wife, the long-suffering mother who holds the family together while Peter destroys everything around him. She's the straight woman, the voice of reason, the one who cleans up the mess, but the show has revealed over and over that Lois is not the person she appears to be. She's committed crimes, she's had affairs, she's stolen, she's lied, she's manipulated, and in some of the show's most revealing episodes, the mask has come off completely. In one arc, Lois discovers she has a talent for shoplifting. She doesn't do it out of necessity. She does it for the thrill, and she's good at it. Really good. She escalates from stealing small items to pulling off elaborate heists, and she enjoys every second of it. The episode reveals that underneath Lois's domestic facade is a woman who is bored, restless, and capable of far more than anyone in her family gives her credit for. In another storyline, Lois runs for mayor of Quahog. She starts as a serious candidate with real policy ideas, but when she realizes the voters don't care about substance, she pivots. She starts pandering. She uses her appearance. She tells the crowd exactly what they want to hear. And she wins. Lois Griffin, the patient housewife, turns out to be a natural politician, which in the Family Guy universe is not a compliment. And then there's her family, the Pewter Schmidts. Lois comes from money, serious money. Her father, Carter, is one of the wealthiest men in Rhode Island. He's also a manipulative, elitist bigot who has never accepted Peter and has spent the entire series trying to undermine their marriage. Lois grew up in this environment. She was raised by a man who views people as assets and relationships as transactions. And while Lois chose to rebel against her upbringing by marrying Peter, the show has repeatedly suggested that she inherited more of her father's nature than she'd like to admit. She's controlling. She's competitive. She's capable of violence when pushed. And the show has put her in situations where her darker impulses surface in ways that are genuinely startling. In one memorable sequence, Lois takes taijutsu classes and rapidly advances to a black belt. The fighting ability goes to her head. She starts beating up New Yorkers who invade Quahog during leaf season. She becomes aggressive at home. She begins physically dominating Peter in ways that blur the line between comedy and domestic violence, but with the roles reversed. The show has also explored the idea that Lois's patience isn't real. It's performance. She stays with Peter not because she loves him unconditionally, but because leaving would mean admitting her father was right. Her marriage is, on some level, an act of defiance against her upbringing, and Peter is the weapon she uses to wage that war. The dumber he is, the more it proves she made her own choice. The more he embarrasses her family, the more she wins. This reading might sound extreme, but the show supports it. In Coma Guy, Lois considers pulling the plug on Peter, and the show suggests she finds the idea of life without him more appealing than terrifying. In the multiverse episodes, alternate versions of Lois are consistently depicted as either miserable or thriving, depending entirely on whether Peter is in the picture. The show keeps telling us that Lois without Peter might actually be happy, and Lois with Peter is performing a role that requires her to suppress everything she actually is. Now, The show has also used its own timeline in ways that deepen the lore considerably. In the Y2K episode, Da Boom, the show went fully apocalyptic. Peter locks his family in a bomb shelter on New Year's Eve, 1999. A nuclear holocaust destroys most of Quahog. Citizens mutate. Stewie is exposed to nuclear waste and transforms into an octopus creature who begins laying eggs. The family travels to a Twinkie factory, establishes a new town called New Quahog, and Peter mismanages it into chaos. Meanwhile, Stewie's spawn hatch and begin killing the surviving citizens. The episode ends with a live-action parody of Dallas, revealing it was all a dream. But the imagery of the episode, the mutations, the cannibalism, the infant laying eggs, the collapse of civilization, is some of the most genuinely horrifying content the show has ever produced. And it aired in season 2, before the show found its voice, before it became known for pushing boundaries. This early in its run, Family Guy was already willing to depict the end of the world in graphic detail and frame it as entertainment. The show has also played with time travel in ways that create disturbing implications. Stewie's time machine has been used across multiple episodes to alter history, prevent deaths, and reset timelines. But the show has established that time travel in the Family Guy universe doesn't erase the original timeline. It creates new ones, which means every time Stewie goes back to fix something, the original version of events still exists somewhere. The timeline where Brian died still exists. The timeline where Stewie killed Lois still exists. The timeline where the world ended from Y2K still exists. They're all out there, running in parallel, and nobody in the main timeline knows or cares. This multiplies the horror of the show's darkest moments exponentially. Every terrible thing that has ever happened in Family Guy hasn't just happened once. It's happened and continues to exist in a branching tree of timelines that extends infinitely outward. Somewhere, Brian is still dead. Somewhere, Stewie rules the world. Somewhere, Meg never came home from the auction. The show introduced multiverse theory and time travel as comedic tools, but the logical implications of both are nightmarish. And the show knows this. It's gestured toward it in its more self-aware moments. Characters have acknowledged the existence of other timelines. Stewie has expressed discomfort with the ethical implications of his own time travel. Brian has questioned whether the version of himself who walks through the door each day is the same one who walked out. These are real philosophical questions buried inside a show about a fat man who fights chickens. But they're there. And once you see them, once you understand that the Family Guy universe isn't just one dark story, but an infinite number of dark stories playing out across an infinite number of realities, the scope of the show's lore becomes genuinely overwhelming. Family Guy is one of the most self-aware shows on television. It breaks the fourth wall constantly. Characters reference the show's writers, its ratings, its cancellations, and its critics. Peter has looked directly into the camera and addressed the audience. Stewie has commented on the quality of episodes as they're happening. Brian has complained about storylines that feel recycled, and in one of the most revealing moments in the entire series, the show literally addressed its own existence as a product. In viewer mail number 2, the show presents a segment where Peter gains the power to turn everyone he touches into Robin Williams. It sounds like a harmless gag episode, and at first it is, but as Peter accidentally transforms his entire family, his friends, and eventually the entire town into copies of Robin Williams, the episode takes on a nightmarish quality. Peter is surrounded by infinite versions of the same person, each performing, each riffing, each desperate for attention, and he can't stop it. He tries to kill himself. He fails. He cuts off his own hands to prevent himself from touching anyone else. And as he sits there, handless and broken, Stewie sits on a rooftop and notes that of all the versions of Robin Williams they created, they couldn't get permission to do Disney's Genie from Aladdin. The show ends on a joke about intellectual property rights, while its main character is mutilated and insane. This is what Family Guy does better than almost any other show. It tells you the joke is the point, and then shows you the horror underneath it, and then tells you the horror is also a joke. It creates a loop where sincerity and satire are indistinguishable, and the audience never knows which layer they're supposed to take seriously. The answer, most of the time, is all of them. Now there's one character whose departure from the show revealed something uncomfortable about how the Family Guy universe actually works. Cleveland Brown. Cleveland was part of the original friend group. Peter, Quagmire, Joe and Cleveland. 4 guys who drank at the Drunken Clam and got into trouble together. Cleveland was the quiet one, the reasonable one, the moral compass of a group that had no interest in morality. And then he left. Not because the character died or was written out, because he got his own show. The Cleveland show ran from 2009 to 2013. Cleveland moved to Virginia, remarried, and started a new life. And the moment he was gone, the Family Guy universe closed around the hole he left. When Cleveland returned after his show was cancelled, the transition was seamless. He walked back into the Clam, sat in his booth, picked up a beer, and everything went back to the way it was. The show didn't acknowledge his absence in any meaningful way. It didn't explore what it meant for him to leave and come back. It just slotted him back into position, like a replacement part in a machine. And that's the point. In Family Guy, no one is irreplaceable. Brian died and was replaced by Vinny. Cleveland left and was replaced by nothing. The group continued without him. The show continued without him. His presence or absence didn't change the fundamental dynamics of the series, because the dynamics aren't built on characters. They're built on functions. Peter needs someone to bounce off of. Joe needs someone to contrast with. Quagmire needs someone to be slightly worse than. Cleveland filled a role. When he left, the role went unfilled. When he came back, the role was refilled. That's it. This connects to another persistent mystery in the Family Guy universe: the economics of the Griffin household. Peter Griffin has been fired from multiple jobs across the series. He has destroyed company property, assaulted co-workers, been investigated by federal agencies, and demonstrated a level of incompetence that would make him unhireable in any real-world scenario. And yet, the family always has a house. They always have food. They always have cars, televisions, vacations, and the general trappings of a middle-class suburban life. The show has never explained how this works. Peter's primary employer throughout the series has been the Pawtucket Brewery, where he holds a vaguely defined position that seems to involve sitting at a desk and occasionally operating machinery. He has been promoted and demoted multiple times. He has been fired and rehired with no explanation. His supervisor Angela tolerated him for years until her death, after which the brewery hired new management that somehow found Peter even more confusing than Angela did. Lois doesn't work consistently. The kids don't contribute. Brian has no income. The family should have been bankrupt years ago, but the mortgage gets paid. The lights stay on. The fridge stays full. Because in the Family Guy universe, economic reality is just another rule that gets suspended whenever it's inconvenient. This isn't just a plot convenience, it's a statement about the show's relationship with consequences. If Peter could actually lose his house, if the family could actually go hungry, if economic failure had real stakes, the show would have to reckon with Peter's behaviour in a way it's never willing to do. So it doesn't. It keeps the lights on, keeps the family fed, and keeps Peter free to destroy everything around him without ever having to face what he's destroyed. And then there's the question of God. Because Family Guy hasn't just created a universe where morality is optional. It's created a universe where God exists, is aware of everything that's happening, and simply doesn't care. In 3 acts of God, the family watches the Patriots lose a football game. The opposing players credit God for their win. And Peter, in typical Peter fashion, decides to find God and confront him about messing with sports. The family travels through churches, across countries, and through multiple religious traditions, eventually encountering various deities and holy figures. They meet Kronos, the Greek god of time. They meet Jesus, who is dating Carrie Underwood. They encounter religious figures who are either useless, self-absorbed, or entirely disconnected from human suffering. And when they finally encounter something resembling the divine, the answer they get isn't comforting. God doesn't care about football. God doesn't care about Quahog. God exists in the Family Guy universe the same way death does. As a bureaucrat, as a functionary, as someone who has a job to do and would rather be doing something else. The show has taken this even further. It's depicted the creation of the universe as a literal fart joke, God lighting a lighter while passing gas and accidentally creating existence. That's not just a gag. That's the show's cosmology. The Big Bang was an accident. Creation was unintentional. The universe exists because God was bored and made a mistake. If you follow this through to its logical conclusion, every character in Family Guy, every person in Quahog, every version of the Griffins across every multiverse exists because of a divine accident. They weren't planned, they weren't wanted. They're the cosmic equivalent of a mess someone made and never cleaned up. And that tracks perfectly with how the show treats its characters. With the indifference of a creator who never intended for any of it to happen. The show has also introduced the concept of an afterlife, but in typically Family Guy fashion, it's neither comforting nor terrifying. It's just bureaucratic. When Peter has near-death experiences, the afterlife looks like a waiting room. When characters encounter heaven, it's boring. When they encounter hell, it's manageable. Even eternity, in Family Guy, is just another place where nothing fundamentally changes. This is the theological position of a show created by a man who survived a plane crash by accident and spent the next 20 years processing what that means. Family Guy's God isn't evil. He isn't malicious. He isn't even particularly interested. He's just there. And so is everything he accidentally created. That indifference permeates every level of the show. The universe doesn't care about Peter's stupidity, or Meg's suffering, or Stewie's genius, or Brian's despair. It just watches. It just continues. And the characters, trapped inside a reality they didn't ask for and can't escape, do the only thing they can do. They keep going. They keep fighting. They keep hurting each other. And they keep sitting down to dinner at the end of the day as if none of it happened. Because in Family Guy, dinner always happens. The table always gets set. The family always reconvenes. And tomorrow, it starts all over again. And there's one more character we haven't given enough attention to. A character who sits at the intersection of the show's darkest themes. A man whose very existence in the friend group raises questions the show has never fully answered. Joe Swanson. Joe is a police officer. He's paralysed from the waist down. He lives next door to the Griffins. And he is, by the show's own framing, the most competent and morally grounded member of the friend group. He's the one who solves crimes. He's the one who intervenes when situations escalate. He's the one who, in theory, should be the check on Peter's chaos and Quagmire's predation. But the show has systematically undermined Joe across its entire run. His wife Bonnie is miserable in their marriage. She spent years contemplating leaving him. In one storyline, she travels to France and has an affair. In another, she openly discusses her unhappiness in front of the friend group. The show has established that Bonnie stays with Joe not out of love, but out of obligation. She married a man who could walk and ended up caring for a man who can't, and the resentment has hollowed out their relationship from the inside. Joe knows this, and the show uses his awareness of it as a source of both comedy and tragedy. He overcompensates by being the best cop in Quahog. He throws himself into his work with an intensity that borders on self-destruction. He has chased criminals, fought terrorists, and taken down entire organisations from a wheelchair. But none of it changes the fundamental dynamic at home. Bonnie doesn't love him the way she used to, and Joe can't make her. In one of the more uncomfortable storylines, Joe meets a woman named Nora, who is attracted to him. She kisses him. She admires his achievements, she sees him the way Bonnie used to, and Joe, for the first time in years, feels wanted. He considers pursuing the relationship. He takes Nora to what the show calls his handicapped stool getaway, a secret spot he's prepared for intimate encounters. But he's physically unable to follow through. His body won't cooperate, and the moment collapses. The next day, Joe feels guilty, but Bonnie overhears his confession and reveals that she never actually cheated in France. She lied about it, or at the very least, exaggerated. They fight, they threaten divorce, and then, like everything else in Family Guy, the conflict dissolves. They stay together. Nothing changes, the cycle continues. Joe Swanson is the show's version of a good man trapped in a universe that doesn't reward goodness. He does his job, he loves his wife, he tries to be a good father, and the universe responds by taking his legs, eroding his marriage, and surrounding him with friends who are, by any rational measure, terrible people. Peter is a destructive idiot. Quagmire is a sexual predator. Cleveland is a passive bystander. And Joe sits at the drunken clam with all three of them, night after night, because they're all he has. The show has also used Joe to explore disability in ways that range from genuinely progressive to deeply uncomfortable. On one hand, Joe is portrayed as capable, brave, and often the most effective person in any given situation. On the other hand, the show frequently uses his paralysis as the setup for jokes that rely entirely on the audience's discomfort with disability. Peter has used Joe as a puppet. Characters have made comments about his legs that would be considered harassment in any real-world context. And the show has created scenarios where Joe's disability is the sole source of humour, with no additional layer or commentary. The result is a character who exists in a constant state of contradiction. He's both empowered and diminished, respected and mocked, capable and limited. And the show never resolves these contradictions because resolving them would require a level of sincerity that Family Guy is structurally incapable of sustaining. But Joe's role in the show goes beyond his personal storylines. He represents something about the way power works in Quahog that ties into everything we've discussed. Joe is the law. He's a police officer. He has authority, jurisdiction, and the ability to enforce consequences, and he almost never uses it against his friends. Peter has committed crimes that Joe has personally witnessed: destruction of property, assault, manslaughter. Joe has been present for many of these incidents and has either looked the other way or actively participated in covering them up. The asylum murder in Peter Normal Activity is a perfect example. Joe was there. Joe is a cop. Joe helped bury the body. This means the one character in the show who could impose consequences, who could break the cycle of destruction and reset, chooses not to. Not because he's corrupt, but because his friendship with Peter matters more to him than his duty. Joe would rather be complicit in murder than lose his seat at the bar, and the show never frames this as a moral failing. It frames it as loyalty. That's the Family Guy definition of friendship. Not honesty, not accountability, not mutual growth, just presence, just showing up, just sitting in the same booth at the same bar and pretending that none of the horrible things you've done together actually happened. And the show has a name for this. Well, it doesn't give it a name explicitly, but there's a concept running through every episode, every season, every character arc in the series: reset. The idea that no matter what happens, no matter how catastrophic the events of an episode are, everything returns to baseline by the time the credits roll. Peter destroys a building. It's rebuilt next episode. Meg stands up for herself. She's back to being abused next episode. Brian has a breakthrough. He's back to being depressed next episode. The show resets, and the disturbing implication of that reset is this: if nothing ever changes, then nothing anyone does matters. Not the good things, not the bad things, not the moments of connection or the acts of violence. All of it gets erased by the next episode's cold open. The characters aren't living. They're performing, running the same routines, hitting the same marks, suffering the same injuries, and waking up fresh the next day to do it all again. It's Groundhog Day without the growth. It's purgatory with a laugh track. And the characters know it. They've said as much in their most self-aware moments. Stewie has questioned the nature of his reality. Brian has expressed existential dread about the meaninglessness of his existence. Even Peter, in his dimmest moments, has seemed to sense that something about his life doesn't add up, that the same problems keep recurring, that the same solutions keep failing, that the cycle never breaks. The show was cancelled twice, it came back twice, and each time it returned to the same family, the same town, the same dynamic, as if nothing had happened during the years it was off the air. The show itself is trapped in the same loop as its characters. It can't evolve because its audience doesn't want it to evolve. They want Peter to fall down. They want Stewie to scheme. They want Meg to suffer. And the show, like a machine built to deliver exactly what is demanded of it, obliges. That's the final piece of the lore. The most disturbing element of Family Guy isn't any single joke or episode or character. It's the structure, the architecture of a show that has been engineered over 24 seasons and more than 400 episodes to consume its own characters in an endless cycle of dysfunction, destruction, and reset. A show that gives its audience exactly what it wants, and in doing so, traps its characters in a loop they can never escape. Peter will never grow, Meg will never be free, Brian will never find purpose, Stewie will never be honest, Quagmire will never change, Joe will never enforce the law, Cleveland will never matter, and Lois will never leave, because the show needs them exactly where they are. Broken, functional enough to produce content, dysfunctional enough to keep the audience watching. That's the real lore of Family Guy, and it's been hiding in plain sight the entire time. And while we're pulling threads, there's one more character we need to revisit, Chris Griffin. Because beyond the Buffalo Bill voice and the bumbling exterior, the show has built a surprisingly dark profile for the middle child that most viewers overlook entirely. Chris is usually played as the dumb kid, the one who can't keep up, the one who draws inappropriate things and says the wrong thing at the wrong time. But the show has given Chris moments that suggest something much more complicated is going on underneath. In one storyline, Stewie and Brian discover that Chris has developed a severe pornography addiction. It's not played as a joke about teenagers being curious. It's played as a genuine dependency that has replaced his desire for real human connection. A hot girl asks Chris on a date and he turns her down because he'd rather stay home with his computer. Stewie and Brian manage to wean him off the addiction and he finally goes on the date. But the girl's popular friends are into thrill kills. The next morning's headline reports that a local teen has been killed. The show connected Chris's recovery from addiction directly to someone's death. His return to the real world, his attempt to be normal, led to him being present for or involved in a murder. The show dropped this immediately and never revisited it. But the implication is dark. Chris can't even rejoin normal teenage life without violence following him. In another episode, Chris reads Meg's diary and they both accidentally knock Stewie down the stairs, leaving him unconscious with a severe head wound. Instead of calling for help, Chris and Meg hide the injury with a hat and pretend nothing happened. When Peter discovers the truth, he doesn't help either. Instead, he waits until Lois is pulling out of the driveway and throws Stewie behind her rear tire to make it look like she ran him over. 3 family members collude to frame a 4th for injuring a baby, and the baby doesn't recover for months. Stewie walks in during the credits, bandaged and confused, asking what happened to him because it's now November, and he has no memory of the intervening months. The show framed an infant's traumatic brain injury as a family comedy subplot, and the resolution wasn't medical treatment or accountability, it was gaslighting. Chris has also been the target of Herbert's predatory behaviour for the entire series, and the show has never given Chris the awareness to understand what's happening to him. He doesn't know Herbert is dangerous. He sees a friendly old man who gives him popsicles and tells him he's handsome. The dramatic irony of Chris being too innocent to recognise a predator while the audience watches in discomfort is one of the show's longest running and most uncomfortable threads. And then there's Mayor Adam West. The show featured a fictionalised version of the real actor Adam West as the mayor of Quahog for years. This version of West was absurd, delusional, paranoid, and utterly incompetent. He married a cardboard cutout. He hunted imaginary threats. He made decisions that endangered the entire town. And the citizens of Quahog kept electing him because in this universe, governance is just another system that doesn't work. When the real Adam West passed away in 2017, the show retired the character. They held a memorial. They acknowledged the loss. And then they replaced him with a new mayor who was equally incompetent but less charming. The show acknowledged that Adam West was irreplaceable and then demonstrated through his replacement that in Quahog, everyone is replaceable. The system doesn't need specific people. It needs bodies to fill roles. And when one body is gone, another slides in. This connects to a broader pattern in how Family Guy handles real-world tragedy. The show has referenced 9/11, the Boston Marathon bombing, school shootings, pandemics, and natural disasters across its run. Sometimes these references are satirical. Sometimes they're genuinely tasteless. And sometimes they occupy a space that's impossible to categorize. In one cutaway, Peter drives a car through the Boston Marathon. This is a joke that aired before the actual Boston Marathon bombing in 2013. After the real attack, the episode was pulled from circulation. The show had accidentally predicted a tragedy and turned it into a punchline before it happened. This is the kind of coincidence that haunts a show like Family Guy, because the writer's willingness to mine real-world violence for comedy means they're constantly orbiting events that haven't happened yet, and sometimes reality catches up. The show has also depicted mass shootings, terrorism, and political violence in ways that range from pointed satire to what critics have called irresponsible shock value. But the show's defense has always been the same. Nothing is off limits. Everything is fair game. And the moment you start deciding what can and can't be joked about, you've already lost the argument about what comedy is for. Whether you agree with that philosophy or not, the result is a show that has created an archive of American anxiety spanning more than 2 decades. Every fear, every tragedy, every cultural flashpoint of the 21st century has been processed through the Family Guy machine and turned into content. The show isn't just reflecting American life, it's metabolizing it, taking the darkest moments of the culture and converting them into entertainment, the same way it converts its characters' suffering into episodes. And that process, that constant conversion of pain into product, is perhaps the most disturbing element of the show's lore. Not any individual joke, not any single episode, but the relentless, systematic transformation of human darkness into something you can watch on a Sunday night while eating takeout. The show has been doing this for 24 seasons, over 400 episodes, and it shows no signs of stopping, because the world keeps producing darkness, and Family Guy keeps consuming it. That's the engine, that's the machine. And every character we've discussed, every storyline we've examined, every disturbing moment we've catalogued is just fuel. And if you think the show has exhausted its capacity to shock after everything we've discussed, you'd be wrong. Because we've covered the main characters, We've covered the family dynamics, we've covered the philosophical implications and the meta-awareness and the real-world connections. But there's still an entire layer of this show that exists in the margins. The individual scenes, the specific moments, the images that the show put on screen, between commercial breaks on network television, and then moved on from as if they were nothing. These are the moments that don't fit neatly into a character analysis or a thematic breakdown. They're too specific, too visceral, too committed to their own darkness to be reduced to a talking point. They're the moments where Family Guy stopped being a comedy with dark elements and became something else entirely. Something that exists in the space between satire and genuine horror. Something that makes you laugh, and then makes you wonder why you laughed. And then makes you wonder what it says about you that you're still watching. So let's catalogue them. Not to judge the show for making them, but to acknowledge that they exist, that they aired, that millions of people saw them, and that they're now permanently part of the cultural record. Because the lore of Family Guy isn't just built from storylines and character arcs, it's built from moments, and some of these moments are burned into the memory of everyone who witnessed them. Let's start with the character that Family Guy has kept around for over 20 seasons, despite the fact that his entire existence revolves around a single, deeply uncomfortable joke. Herbert, the old man on Spooner Street, who has an obvious, barely concealed obsession with underage boys, specifically Chris Griffin. Herbert made his first appearance in season 3. Chris gets a paper route, and Herbert is one of his customers. From the very first interaction, the show makes it clear what Herbert is. He invites Chris into his house. He makes sexual innuendos. He lures him with promises of popsicles. The lisp, the bathrobe, the slow walk, all of it is designed to communicate one thing. This man is a predator. And the show has kept him around as a recurring character for 2 decades. Now here's what makes this genuinely disturbing from a lore perspective. The show doesn't treat Herbert as a villain. It treats him as a joke. He shows up, makes everyone uncomfortable, and the scene moves on. But the show has also given him heroic moments. He's fought for Chris's safety. He's been shown as a veteran with a backstory. The show has humanized a character whose defining trait is his attraction to children, and it's never reckoned with the contradiction. In one episode, the show has Herbert attempt to finally act on his obsession during what he believes are the last hours of Earth. Everyone in Quahog is trying to live out their final wishes. Herbert's final wish is Chris. That's it. That's the gag. A pedophile trying to assault a teenager before the world ends, framed as a punchline in the same montage where Quagmire sleeps with Bonnie and Peter steals a lion from the zoo. The show has never had Herbert face consequences. He's never been arrested, never been confronted in a meaningful way. The family knows he exists, the neighbourhood knows what he is, and nobody does anything. In a show that prides itself on pushing boundaries, the Herbert character exists in a space that goes beyond offensive comedy into something that feels genuinely unexamined. The show created a predator, made him a fan favourite, and never dealt with what that means. Now, if Herbert represents the show's willingness to normalise something deeply wrong through repetition, the next episode represents what happens when Family Guy drops the comedy entirely and goes fully dark. And it's widely considered the most disturbing episode the show has ever produced. Season 10, Episode 3, Screams of Silence, the story of Brenda Q. The episode opens with Peter and Joe returning from a fishing trip. Quagmire wasn't with them, which is unusual. They check on him and find he's in the hospital after what appears to be an autoerotic asphyxiation accident. While he recovers, his sister Brenda and her boyfriend Jeff come to visit. And from the moment Jeff appears on screen, the tone of the episode shifts completely. Jeff is abusive, not in a comedic, exaggerated Family Guy way, in a realistic, grounded, horrifying way. He yells at Brenda in front of everyone. He controls her movements, he insults her, he hits her. The show depicts this abuse without cutaway gags, without jokes, without any of the usual Family Guy deflection techniques. It plays the violence straight, and the result is one of the most uncomfortable viewing experiences in animated television. The entire neighbourhood can hear Jeff's rages at night. Lois tries to talk to Brenda about leaving him, but Brenda does what real victims of domestic violence often do. She makes excuses, she minimises, she says he loves her, she stays. And this is where the episode crosses a line that most shows would never approach. Quagmire, Peter and Joe decide that the only way to save Brenda is to kill Jeff. Not report him, not intervene legally, kill him. They plan it, they execute it, and they succeed. Jeff is dead, and the episode ends. There's no arrest, no trial, no moral reckoning. 3 men decided that the legal system couldn't protect Brenda, so they committed premeditated murder. And the show validates their decision by framing it as the only option. The audience is supposed to agree that Jeff needed to die, and honestly, most viewers probably did agree, which is exactly what makes the episode so disturbing. Because the show put the audience in a position where they were rooting for extrajudicial killing. This wasn't a cartoon villain getting blown up in a slapstick explosion. This was 3 men strangling a woman's boyfriend in a realistic depiction of domestic violence and murder. And it's aired on Fox on a Sunday night. Now, from domestic violence, the show has also tackled disease in ways that are genuinely hard to stomach. In Herpy the Love Sore, which we mentioned earlier, Brian knowingly infects Stewie with herpes through a blood brothers ritual. The visuals in this episode are designed to make you recoil. Stewie, a baby, walking around with graphic, oozing sores on his face. The show lingers on these images. It doesn't cut away or soften them. It forces you to look at what Brian's selfishness did to the person who trusts him most. And the episode goes further by showing a flash forward where future Stewie is covered in sores, leaking pus, and invisible pain. This is a lifelong condition that Brian gave him out of a desperate need to feel connected. The show never fully resolves this. Stewie doesn't forgive Brian because it's okay. He forgives him because he has no one else. But the show's capacity for disturbing imagery goes beyond interpersonal drama. Some of its most shocking moments come wrapped in the packaging of holiday specials. Road to the North Pole is a Christmas episode. Stewie and Brian, after encountering a rude mole Santa, decide to travel to the actual North Pole to confront the real Santa Claus. It sounds like a typical road to adventure. It is anything but. When they arrive, they find a hellscape. Santa is a broken, depressed old man who is so overwhelmed by the demands of modern Christmas that he's essentially running a sweatshop. The elves have been forced to inbreed to produce more workers, and the results are horrifying. Mutated, deformed creatures that barely resemble anything alive. The reindeer have devolved into feral, carnivorous beasts that attack anything that moves. The workshop isn't a magical toy factory. It's a torture chamber run by a man who wants to die. Santa asks Stewie to kill him. That's his Christmas wish, for a baby to put a bullet in his head and end his suffering. When Stewie and Brian refuse and instead try to deliver the presents themselves, things get exponentially worse. They break into a house, encounter the family who lives there, and in the panic, assault the parents in front of their child. The show doesn't shy away from the horror of this. 2 intruders breaking into a home on Christmas Eve, physically attacking the residents while a kid watches. It's played partly for dark comedy, but the imagery is profoundly unsettling. This is a Christmas episode for a family comedy on network television. And while we're on the subject of holiday episodes, the show has a famous musical number that might be the single darkest musical sequence in animation history. Prom Night Dumpster Baby. A full song and dance number about infants being abandoned in dumpsters on prom night. The song is catchy. The choreography is elaborate. The babies are dancing and singing about being discarded by their teenage mothers, and it's based on real events, real news stories about prom night babies found in trash cans. The show took those stories and turned them into a Broadway-style production number. AIDS organizations protested another musical number from the show. In The Cleveland Loretta Quagmire, Peter appears with a barbershop quartet to deliver a man's positive HIV diagnosis through song. The crew admitted on the DVD commentary that the joke was intentionally tasteless, but the backlash was real because the joke wasn't just dark. It was making light of a pandemic that has killed millions of people, and it was doing it with a smile and four-part harmony. Now the show has also pushed boundaries with its treatment of real historical events in ways that go beyond bad taste into something more complicated. The Anne Frank sequence we mentioned earlier isn't the only time the show has used the Holocaust as material. The show revealed that Lois's mother is a Holocaust survivor, making the family partially Jewish. It's then used Peter's reaction to this news, attempting to shoot Lois as comedy. The show simultaneously acknowledges the horror of the Holocaust and uses it as a springboard for jokes about interfaith marriage. That tonal whiplash is intentional. It's the show's signature move. Present something genuinely awful, wait for the audience to feel the weight of it, and then deflect with absurdity. But not every dark moment in Family Guy is played for laughs. Some of them land with a weight that feels genuinely accidental, as though the writers stumbled into emotional territory they weren't prepared for and couldn't back out of. Coma Guy is one of those episodes. Peter falls into a coma. Lois is left to decide whether to pull the plug. While he's unconscious, Peter encounters the spirits of characters who have died throughout the series. He's given the option to cross over to the other side. He refuses because, in a perfectly Peter moment, there's no Wi-Fi password in the afterlife. But the darker thread of the episode is Lois. She goes through the process of deciding to end her husband's life. She weighs the options. She considers what her life would look like without him, and she resigns herself to pulling the plug. Not with grief, with something closer to relief. The show implies that Lois has thought about what it would be like to not be married to Peter, and the idea doesn't horrify her. It appeals to her. Even after Peter wakes up, the episode suggests Lois still considered leaving him, that their marriage survived not because of love, but because of inertia. And then there's Quagmire. We've talked about Herbert as the show's most uncomfortable character, but Quagmire gives him a run for his money. Glenn Quagmire is a serial sex offender, played as a lovable rogue. The show has implied, stated, or depicted him committing sexual assault on dozens of occasions across the series. He's broken into women's homes, he's drugged women, he's had sex with minors. He's been caught in acts so egregious that, if any of it were real, he would be in prison for multiple lifetimes. But the show treats Quagmire as a charming, if inappropriate, member of the friend group. He goes to the bar with Peter and Joe. He attends family events. He's a regular part of the Quahog community, and nobody holds him accountable because the show has established that his behaviour is just Quagmire being Quagmire. The catchphrase, the wink, the giggity, all of it serves as social lubricant that allows the audience and the characters to look past what he actually is. In one crossover gag, the show presents a fake promotion for The Simpsons. Quagmire appears in Springfield and assaults Marge Simpson off-screen. She initially resists, then apparently enjoys it. The scene was designed to provoke and it succeeded, but it also revealed something about how the show views sexual violence as material, as content, as something that can be deployed for shock value without consequence. The show has also explored Quagmire's family in ways that are uniquely disturbing. His father, Dan, undergoes gender reassignment surgery and becomes Ida. The show uses this to explore Quagmire's discomfort with his father's transition, and while there are moments of genuine emotional complexity, the episode is also used as a vehicle for the Brian plot we discussed earlier, where Brian sleeps with Ida, vomits when he finds out who she is, and then gets beaten nearly to death by Quagmire. The show took a story about a family navigating gender identity and turned it into a vehicle for sexual disgust and physical violence. Quagmire's sister Brenda, the victim of domestic violence in Screams of Silence, is another thread the show pulled and then dropped. After the guys kill Jeff, Brenda is presumably free, but the show never follows up. We never see Brenda again. We never learn if she recovered, if she found safety, if she understood what's happened. The show addressed domestic violence with shocking sincerity, resolved it with murder, and then walked away. And the disturbing lore doesn't stop with the characters we know. It extends to the very fabric of the show's world. Chris Griffin, the family's son, is voiced by Seth Green, and Green has said publicly that his voice for Chris was inspired by Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs. The serial killer. The man who dances in front of a mirror wearing the skin of his victims. That cadence, that slightly off rhythm, that vaguely unsettling quality to Chris's voice, it comes from one of the most famous fictional murderers in cinema history. The show acknowledged this directly. In Season 7, there's an episode where Chris reenacts the Buffalo Bill mirror scene in his bedroom. The character, whose voice is based on a serial killer, acts out that killer's most famous scene. And the show plays it as a throwback gag, a wink to the audience who knows the reference. But knowing that Chris's entire vocal identity was built from a murderer adds a layer to every scene he's ever been in. Every time Chris speaks, you're hearing an echo of Buffalo Bill. The show has also created at least one confirmed additional child of Peter and Lois who didn't survive. Beyond Peter Jr., who was shaken to death, there are references throughout the series to other children. Bertram, Stewie's half-brother, was conceived when Peter donated sperm for money. Bertram shares Stewie's genius and his capacity for evil, and his existence raises uncomfortable questions about how many other Peter Griffin offspring might be out there, products of a man who has demonstrated repeatedly that he is unfit to be a parent. And then there's the matter of Meg's possible origins. The show has hinted at various points that Meg might not be Peter's biological daughter. In one episode, Lois suggests that Meg's real father could be someone else entirely. If true, this would mean the family member who receives the most abuse from Peter isn't even his child. He'd be systematically tormenting someone else's daughter while believing she's his own. Or worse, knowing she isn't and punishing her for it. These aren't fan theories. These are plot threads the show itself has introduced, explored partially, and then abandoned. The lore of Family Guy isn't built from a cohesive mythology like some animated shows attempt. It's built from fragments, contradictions, half-told stories and implications left hanging. And that's what makes it so unsettling. Because the show gives you just enough to see the shape of something horrible and then changes the subject before you can look directly at it. And if you've made it this far, if you've sat through the matricide simulations and the suicidal confessions and the buried bodies and the abused teenagers and the mutant elves, you might be wondering the same thing I am. Why does any of this matter? Why does a cartoon about a fat man in Rhode Island deserve this kind of analysis? The answer is simpler and more disturbing than you might expect. Family Guy has been on the air for over 20 years. It premiered on January 31st, 1999. It was cancelled after Season 2, brought back, cancelled again after Season 3. Brought back a second time, this time because reruns on Adult Swim and record-breaking DVD sales proved the audience was there. The show that Fox threw away twice became one of their most profitable properties. And in the years since, it has aired over 400 episodes, produced multiple specials, spawned a feature-length film, and become one of the longest-running animated series in American history. That kind of longevity creates something unusual. It creates a universe, not just a setting, but a genuine fictional reality with history, contradictions, unresolved threads, and a weight that accumulates episode by episode, season by season, until the whole thing starts to feel less like a comedy and more like an ecosystem. An ecosystem where cruelty is the dominant currency and survival depends on how much pain you can absorb without breaking. But before we close this out, there are threads we haven't pulled yet. Pieces of lore that most viewers have either missed entirely or dismissed as one-off jokes that were never meant to carry weight. Except in Family Guy, everything carries weight whether the show intends it to or not. Because when you build a universe across 24 seasons, the throwaway moments start to connect. And the picture they form is the one the show would probably prefer you didn't look at too closely. Let's talk about death. Not metaphorical death, actual, literal, permanent death in a show where nothing is supposed to be permanent. Family Guy has killed main characters on multiple occasions. Brian's death is the most famous, but it's not the only one. In the season 11 finale, Roads to Vegas, Stewie and Brian use Stewie's teleportation pad to travel to Las Vegas. But the pad malfunctions, creating duplicates of both characters. One pair has incredible luck, the other pair has a nightmare. The unlucky Brian becomes suicidal. He openly discusses wanting to die. He's lost everything. He's trapped in a spiral of failure and humiliation. And by the end of the episode, one version of Brian is shot and killed by a mob enforcer. One version of Stewie has a gun held to his head. Only one Brian and one Stewie survive, and they aren't the same pair. The Brian who walks away is not the Brian who started the episode. He's a duplicate, a copy, and the show never addresses whether the original was the one who died. Think about that for a second. The Brian we've been watching since Roads to Vegas might not be the real Brian. He might be a clone who inherited the memories of a dead dog. And nobody in the show, not even Stewie, seems to know or care which version survived. The show introduced the possibility that its characters can be replaced without anyone noticing, and then kept going as if it didn't matter. This tracks with a larger pattern in the show's universe. Identity in Family Guy is disposable. Characters are killed, cloned, replaced, and overwritten constantly. Peter has died and come back. Stewie has died in simulations. Brian was literally replaced by another dog for 3 episodes. The family has moved between dimensions. They've been reset, rebooted, and reassembled so many times that the question of who these people actually are becomes genuinely philosophical. Are the Griffins we're watching now the same Griffins from the pilot? How many of them have been replaced? How many versions of this family have existed across the show's timeline? The show itself doesn't seem to know, and that ambiguity is part of what makes the lore so disturbing. Because if the characters can be swapped out at any time, then nothing about them, their relationships, their growth, their pain, actually belongs to them. They're just patterns repeating in a loop. And speaking of loops, let's talk about something the show introduced early on, and has never adequately explained. The chicken fights. Peter Griffin has an ongoing feud with Ernie the giant chicken. They've fought in multiple episodes across the entire series. These fights are elaborate, destructive, multi-location brawls that destroy buildings, crash planes, level entire city blocks, and once sent them both through time itself. In Internal Affairs, Peter and Ernie land on Stewie's time pad during a fight and battle their way across history, eventually ending up in a genetic research lab and in space. They crash onto an oil rig. Ernie appears to die in a rocket explosion. But at the end, he's shown to have survived. He always survives. Now on the surface, the chicken fights are just an excuse for Family Guy to do extended action sequences. But from a lore perspective, they raise a question the show has never answered. Why? What started this? The show has given a vague origin story involving Ernie giving Peter a bad coupon, but that explanation doesn't match the intensity of the violence. These aren't arguments, they're death matches. Peter and Ernie fight with the intention of killing each other, and neither one ever permanently dies. They're locked in an eternal cycle of destruction that levels everything around them and accomplishes nothing. If you wanted to read the chicken fights as a metaphor for Peter's entire character, you could make a pretty strong case. Peter is a man stuck in patterns he can't break. He fights the same battles, makes the same mistakes, destroys the same things, and wakes up the next morning as if none of it happened. The chicken is just the most literal version of a cycle that defines his entire life. Fight, destroy, reset, repeat, and the collateral damage from these fights is genuinely staggering. Cars explode, buildings collapse, bystanders are crushed, burned, and thrown through windows. The show never counts the bodies, but if you took the chicken fights out of the cartoon context and imagined them as real events, Peter Griffin would have a civilian body count in the hundreds. And the show treats each fight as a comedic set piece, complete with dramatic music and slow motion. This ties into one of the most fundamental and disturbing aspects of the Family Guy universe. The show exists in a world without lasting consequences. Characters die and come back. Cities are destroyed and rebuilt. Relationships are shattered and repaired within a single episode. And because nothing sticks, nothing matters. The show has built its entire philosophy around the idea that permanence is an illusion and that the only constant is chaos. But here's the thing. The show has also demonstrated in its best episodes that consequences do matter. Brian's death mattered. Stewie's therapy session mattered. Meg's hurricane speech mattered. The Brenda Quagmire episode mattered. These moments landed with real emotional weight precisely because they broke the show's own rules. They introduced permanence into a universe designed to prevent it. And that tension between the show's default nihilism and its occasional sincerity is what makes the lore so compelling and so disturbing. The show wants you to believe that nothing matters, and then it shows you something that does. Now let's talk about something that happens behind the screen, because the lore of Family Guy isn't just contained within the episodes. Some of the most disturbing elements of this show exist in the space between fiction and reality. Seth MacFarlane created Family Guy. He voices Peter, Stewie, Brian, and Quagmire, among other characters. He is the creative engine behind a show that has spent 2 decades exploring the absolute worst things human beings can do to each other. And he almost wasn't alive to make any of it. On September 11th, 2001, Seth MacFarlane was booked on American Airlines Flight 11, the plane that hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He arrived at the airport late. His travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. He missed the flight by approximately 15 minutes. If his agent had given him the correct time, Seth MacFarlane would have been on that plane. Family Guy, which had already been cancelled once at that point, would never have come back. The show exists because its creator survived by accident, not by design, not by fate, by a scheduling error. And that randomness, that cosmic indifference to whether one man lives or dies, is baked into every episode of the show. Family Guy's worldview isn't nihilistic by choice. It's nihilistic because the man who created it knows from personal experience that the universe doesn't care. It doesn't distinguish between the guy who makes a television show and the passengers who didn't miss the flight. It just happens. There's a strange symmetry between MacFarlane's near-death experience and the world he built afterward. A show where death is cheap, where suffering is currency, where the universe treats its characters with total indifference. That's not just a creative choice. That's a perspective shaped by surviving something that should have killed you and spending the rest of your life processing what that means. And the show reflects this in ways that go beyond the obvious dark jokes. Family Guy is a show where the main character can shatter every bone in his body, destroy his marriage, traumatize his children, and kill multiple people, and then sit down to dinner the next scene as if nothing happened. It's a show where a baby can murder his mother, take over the world, and then reset to zero with no consequences. It's a show where a dog can confess suicidal ideation in a bank vault and then go home and eat from a bowl on the floor. The disconnect between the darkness of the content and the lightness of the format is the entire point. Family Guy isn't a show that occasionally goes dark. It's a dark show that wears comedy as camouflage. The jokes aren't there because the show is funny. The jokes are there because without them, you'd have to sit with what the show is actually saying. And what it's actually saying is this. This family's broken. This dog is depressed. This baby is dangerous. This town is complicit. And none of it will ever change because the system, the show itself, needs the dysfunction to survive. That's why Meg can never escape. That's why Brian can never find purpose. That's why Peter can never grow. That's why Stewie can never be honest about who he is. Not because the characters are incapable of change, but because the show requires their suffering to continue. It's the engine, the fuel, the entire business model. A family trapped in a loop of cruelty and reset, performing their dysfunction for an audience that returns every week to watch them fail. And the most disturbing part? The show told us this directly. In Seahorse Seashell Party, when Meg accepted her role as the family's lightning rod, she wasn't just speaking for herself, she was speaking for the show. She was acknowledging the contract between Family Guy and its audience. We give you dysfunction, you give us ratings, and nobody ever has to change. The Griffins aren't a family, they're a system. And the system was designed, from the very first episode, to consume its weakest member in order to sustain itself. That's the law of Family Guy, not the cutaway gags, or the musical numbers, or the chicken fights. The law is this: a brilliant, nihilistic, occasionally profound show that has spent more than 2 decades building a universe where cruelty is architecture and compassion is a glitch in the system. A show that killed its creator's favourite character to prove a point about disposability and then brought him back to prove a point about dependency. A show that gave its most abused character one moment of truth and then told her the truth doesn't matter. 24 seasons, over 400 episodes. And underneath all of it, a simple, devastating thesis. In the Family Guy universe, nobody gets out. Nobody gets better. Nobody is saved. The best you can hope for is that someone cares enough to sit in a bank vault with you and admit that they love you before the door opens and everything goes back to the way it was. And if that's not disturbing, I don't know what is. But the individual moments, the specific episodes, the scenes that burn themselves into the memory of anyone who watched them, those deserve their own attention. Because beyond the characters and the themes and the philosophical implications, there are moments in this show that simply should not exist on network television. Moments that aired between commercial breaks for fast food and car insurance. Moments that millions of people saw and then quietly chose not to think about too hard. So let's go through a few more of them, not because they're funny, but because they're part of the record. There's an episode where Peter discovers he was an amazing piano player as a child, but his father Francis had it beaten out of him. The show presents this as straightforward child abuse. Peter's talent was destroyed because his father believed music was sinful. It's played for comedy in the larger context of the episode, but the flashback itself is genuinely disturbing. A child being punished for being gifted. A father who would rather break his son than let him excel at something. In another episode, Peter's mother Thelma dies of a stroke. Peter processes his grief not through therapy or family support, but by spending time with an elderly woman named Evelyn, who reminds him of his mother. They bond, they connect, she kisses him, and then Peter accidentally snaps her back and kills her. He leaves her body with the cemetery groundskeeper and walks away. His mother just died, and his attempt to process that loss ended with him accidentally killing the one person who made him feel better. And the show frames it as a comedic accident. In the same episode, Stewie learns for the first time that he will someday die. He can't sleep. He's terrified. He tries to find comfort in religion and finds nothing. Brian admits his own belief that there's nothing after death, and Stewie considers killing himself preemptively. He tries multiple methods, including hanging, death by cop, and dropping a toaster in the bathtub, which accidentally gives him superpowers. Brian eventually stops him and tells him he shouldn't be afraid of living in the moment. But when Stewie says he might become a singer-songwriter, Brian pauses, reconsiders his position, and tells Stewie to go ahead and kill himself. That's the show's relationship with its own emotional breakthroughs. It creates them. It lets them breathe for just long enough to feel real, and then it undermines them with a joke that reminds you nothing in this universe is sacred. Not even the fear of death. Not even a baby's first confrontation with mortality. And maybe that's the final piece of the puzzle, the thing that ties all of this together into something that actually means something. Family Guy is a show that refuses to let its characters be saved. Not because it hates them, but because it understands something about storytelling that most shows don't. The moment a character is saved, the story is over. And Family Guy doesn't want the story to be over. It wants the story to keep going. It wants the dysfunction to continue, because the dysfunction is the show. Without Meg's suffering, there's no family. Without Brian's depression, there's no depth. Without Stewie's rage, there's no engine. Without Peter's destruction, there's no plot. The show has spent 24 seasons and over 400 episodes building a machine that runs on pain. And every time it introduces a moment of genuine human connection, a real emotion that breaks through the noise. It's not because the machine is malfunctioning. It's because even a machine built on cruelty needs a heartbeat to survive. That's what Brian and Stewie was, a heartbeat, a reminder that somewhere inside this chaotic, vulgar, boundary-destroying comedy, there are two characters who love each other. And that love is the only thing keeping either of them alive. That's what Meg's hurricane speech was, a heartbeat. A teenager who finally told the truth about her family, and was then told that the truth would destroy them. So she swallowed it and went back to being invisible. That's what Stewie's therapy session was, a heartbeat, a baby who dropped his mask for 22 minutes and showed the audience who he really was. A lonely, scared, confused kid who put the mask back on because being himself was too dangerous. These moments are scattered throughout the series like shrapnel. Small, sharp and easy to miss if you're not paying attention, but once you see them, once you connect them to the larger patterns of violence and dysfunction and reset, the picture they form is impossible to ignore. Family Guy isn't a show about a funny family, it's a show about a trapped family. Trapped by their own dysfunction, trapped by a universe that won't let them change, trapped by a show that needs their suffering to continue. And the most disturbing part of all, we keep watching. We tune in every week. We laugh at the cutaways and the chicken fights and Peter falling down the stairs. We share clips on social media. We quote Stewie's one-liners. We meme the musical numbers. And somewhere underneath all of that, there's a dog with a gun in a safety deposit box. A baby who let a man die because he got too close. A teenage girl whose purpose in life is to absorb pain. And a father who shook his infant son to death. That's the lore of Family Guy. And now you can't unsee it. If you made it through all of that, you're clearly the kind of person who appreciates a deep dive that actually goes deep. We've got more coming. More lore, more breakdowns, more of the hidden stories underneath the shows you thought you knew. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Because if Family Guy taught us anything, it's that there's always something darker underneath the surface. You just have to be willing to look. And if you're still listening, go ahead and close your eyes. Let the rest of this wash over you. We're going to take it from the top and walk through it all again, nice and slow. So settle in, get comfortable. And let's go back to the beginning. In this video, we're going to be talking about the most disturbing lore in Family Guy. And I want to start with something most people miss entirely. If you ask the average person what Family Guy is about, they'll say it's a dumb comedy. Peter Griffin falls down, a chicken fight breaks out, Stewie says something British, and there's a random cutaway about something that happened in 1987. Surface level? Sure, that tracks. But underneath 24 seasons of fart jokes and Conway Twitty bits, this show has quietly built one of the most psychologically disturbing fictional universes ever put on television.